And you should see a little red button somewhere saying that we're recording. And Kalina, just want to repeat that we have a quorum.
We do. We have someone from each of the small, medium, and large colleges. We have a member of staff. We have someone from Charter Oak, and we have Central, Southern, and Eastern all present. So we're good.
Okay. Let's then proceed with the agenda. And let me see if I can share it. Hopefully you can still, actually, first thing we need to do the minutes. Can you see the minutes here? I'm flying blind here in WebEx. These are the minutes. I sent them out. I'm not sure if I sent them out earlier, but I did send them out again just before the meeting. Are there any changes that people want to make? I think the main action we took was nominations for chair for the co-chairs. That is to say, Kalina and myself. Meeting changes for March and April. We had to change back from the March 4th meeting to the March 11th meeting because of an error, and that's my responsibility. I thought that the agenda had been sent to Pam Helene and to Andrew at the system office, but somehow I hadn't, and so consequently we didn't have the agenda up 24 hours before the meeting, and that's a requirement. So we went back to the meeting today, which is where we were to start off with before we changed it to the 4th and then changed it back to the 11th. These are very complete minutes from Lois, who should be congratulated on this. Are there any changes? If not, could I have a motion to approve them?
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion minutes are approved. Secondly, let me move this to the center if I can, of the screen. That's the agenda for today, which was sent out in advance, but there is a change we want to make, which is to have Terry Brown, the CEO of Gateway, along with J.D. Mathewson, who will be aiding him, do a presentation on the college strategic plan. I take it it's the one college strategic plan. And we want, in that, since we'll be discussing the matter, we're going to move item 4, which was BOR application for substantive change, from item 4 to item 2C. Can I have a motion to make that change?
So moved.
Francis, thank you. Second?
Second. That was me, Kalina, second.
Oh, that was you, Kalina. I'm sorry. Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Abstentions? Okay, so we've approved the agenda, and let us therefore go to item 2B, which is college strategic plan, and that's going to be presented by the invited guest, Terry Brown. Terry, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, can you all see it? Good.
Yes.
All righty. This might be the first time that I did not break WebEx trying to share a screen. So good afternoon, everybody. And really it is a pleasure to be back before you again. We haven't moved as quickly as we originally planned, but we did get to a point where JD and I thought that it was important to join you again, letting you know where we are and where we're planning on going from here. So Without further ado, because I know you have a very, very full agenda and there's a lot to talk about. Again, we are in the process of developing the strategic plan for CT State in adherence to NETCHI Standard 2, which I'm sure that most, if not all of us, are very familiar with. But planning is particularly important as we are standing up this new institution, really trying to get our arms around the things that we will need to do and the goals that we want to set from the beginning and organize ourselves to reach them. Just by means of reminder, we're talking about a 3-year time frame. So by design, this is not going to be one of those things that goes on for years and years and years. We are going to be, constantly, looking at it and evaluating it. But we made the decision early on that we were going to completely review and possibly revise it only a couple of years into the operations of CT State, and that was on purpose. We've made progress in these other areas that we said that we needed to do, which we will show you in just a little bit. Just by way of time and context, the items in red are the ones that you've seen before when we presented to you all last time. Since then, we spent a fair amount of time in the fall contributing to the substantive change proposal. And if you look under that standard, under the substantive change proposal, those were some of the things that JD and I and others were working to help develop that section. But or I should say by February of 22, so last month, we developed a draft, and I do want to emphasize a draft of the institutional values. And over the last several months, this has all been sort of going in parallel, taking the priorities, the 11 priorities that you may remember from last time, and really trying to distill them and organize them into the major goals and outcomes and initiatives and strategies that we can then include as formal parts of the strategic plan. That work is still going on, but we anticipate finishing that up in the next month or so, with the idea that in April we would like to finalize a complete draft that we can share with the college and colleges and system-wide community, and then really use the month of May to get whatever feedback we can, make revisions and so on. So even though we're a little bit delayed, we're still on pace to submit the plan for approval in June, so that we will have it by the beginning of July. So that's where we are. So in terms of what has happened, one thing that really was one of those major goals, we did not have a set of institutional values, and for a variety of reasons, we thought that was important. And our overall council, 49 members or so strong, we split into 2 subgroups. One group is working on the goals and outcomes and initiatives and so on. And then the other subgroup drafted the values. So we went through a process, we brainstormed, we identified themes, we talked specifically about the things that people thought were important, and came up with these 6 values. I have a draft of the text. I can send that to you all. But in short, and I want to point this out. JD and I, when we were here last time, we heard you. And so one of the first values that we articulated and explicated was that of the way that we have worded it is the transformative power of teaching, learning, education, and training. And then the others follow. So the valuing of service and the holistic development, not only of our students as individuals, but the communities that we serve. Equity, of course, the idea of integrity being more than just honesty, but also authenticity. And the way that we go about our work is in a way that can be trusted by those who have put their trust in us. Mutual respect. Again, we are different people and have different roles, different experiences, backgrounds, and so on. And so the idea that we come together and consider each other and treat each other in ways that affirms the contributions that we all have to make to our mission and to our students. I would also add that in this value of mutual respect, the idea of shared governance is sort of encapsulated or also described in this particular value. And talked about shared governance, not only in terms of its structure, but also the spirit of it, the processes. Shared governance is more than sort of an organizational chart. It's the way we go about doing our business. And then stewardship, effectiveness, and accountability really gets to our valuing the resources that we are entrusted with by our citizens, by the state, by our communities, by business and industry. We are going to do the very best that we know how to do with the resources that are given to us. So that's a quick way. Again, I will, at the risk of messing anything up, will be happy to share the full text of those drafts with you. I do want to say that we are in the process now of having the council review the values, the draft of the values. So there may be more to come. What you will see today or what we'll send today is not the final story. The council will weigh in. We've shared it with CT state leadership, and then once the council has had its say, then we would be ready to share them for widespread review and feedback. JD led the group, or is leading the group, I should say, on the goals. Why don't you talk a little bit about what's happening on that side of things?
Sure, and I just want to address vocally, Professor Cunningham just mentioned, is academic freedom not a value? And that's absolutely right. We should be foregrounding that, and I will take that back to the committee in our next meeting. And especially in this day and age, it's something that absolutely needs to be front and center. So I apologize for that not being included, and we will foreground that. The three goals, we tried to keep it in three different areas with a lot of different benchmarks. And most of these benchmarks are going to be more about implementations more than metrics, even though metrics are involved. But since it's a 3-year plan really about implementing the single college, it's going to be focusing on checking boxes off, like fully implementing guided pathways, holistic case management, migrating to a new consolidated student information system. But there are also things like improving student success rates, improving the number of increasing the number of adult learners in our system to try to head off the demographic cliff that we're facing, improving communication between faculty advisors, guided pathways advisors, and students, deepening professional mentorship, narrowing, we're going to be implementing the guided pathways KPIs for narrowing our gaps between white, Black, and Hispanic Latino student passage of first-year English and math. Also improving representation of Black and Hispanic and Latino and other non-white populations in our overall faculty and staff populations. Exploring the expansion of PACT eligibility, even though that's not exactly our goal, but it's something that we definitely want to push for. And when I say our goal, it's not exactly our goal because it's more of a CSCU goal than a CT state goal, but it's something that I'm personally going to be pushing for as a researcher. And also implementing our CT state shared governance proposal, rolling out professional development services, reviewing our commitment to students' civic education and engagement, which we all see on our committee as something that's very important in the wake of the events of January 6th. And also deepening bonds between students, faculty, foundations, and local campus communities. We want to make sure that we don't throw those away just because we are consolidating. I know that there are going to be challenges and there is going to be some standardization, but we're going to try to keep all best practices and all existing relationships as much as we can in this new system that link students, faculty, foundations, and our local campus communities.
I'm sorry, I missed who made the comment about academic freedom? Oh, I think you're back on mute, JD.
So yeah, sorry, it's first day in a new office and there's construction. Brennan Cunningham asked, "Is academic
Oh,
value
Brendan.
not freedom?"
Okay.
And
Yeah. So, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
that I think that might, you could put that under mutual respect. I wasn't. I let the values committee do their thing. But
Yeah, no, what I was gonna ask, and again, we're gonna send you all the full text of
Right.
the draft, so you can see sort of where stuff is laid out. And I would just say you are absolutely welcome. Just send me an email, just send me a note. I've already made a mental note of academic freedom, but after you've had a chance to look at it, just send me a quick note if you have some specific recommendations for where it should be or even wording. Then we are happy to receive those and work it in.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for bringing that up.
And I'd like to mention we are still, we're late in the process, but we are still be happy to accommodate any new faculty who would like to join our strategic planning council. I know, of course, you always have your hands full, and I don't want to put another unpaid thing on your plate. But we are still inviting additional faculty participation. We do have some faculty on the council, but they are still a very distinct minority. And while we will certainly be circulating the draft and adjusting the draft for any of the constituencies who would like certain changes made or certain additions made, we will absolutely be considering that. But we're also still soliciting any sort of involvement from faculty if they would like to be involved in the final product, as this final product will reflect the perspectives of those who are on our committee, and it has so far, and it will continue to, depending on who is actually on the committee.
Yeah. So the only thing I'll add to that is that given the few numbers of faculty who are on the council, that is part of the reason why JD and I are going to great pains to make sure that we reach out and I joke about it a little bit. You don't have to be a card-carrying member of the council in order to review and make contributions and all of that. But at the end of the day, this is going in front of everybody. And at that point in time, anybody can provide whatever feedback that they care to. So again, JD and I, we said before, and we are still committed to full communication and transparency. That's just what we believe in, and the way that we believe that this process will work best. So that is really the end of our formal presentation. As soon as we're off the line, I will send the full text to David, Kalina, what should we do?
We do have a question, Terry.
Okay. Let me stop sharing and then I can see better. Maybe I can stop sharing. Okay, there we go.
Kalina has her hand up, and I think Mike Shea has a question in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Kalina.
Mike Shea was there before me. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Mike. You're on mute.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Mike Emanuel was just mentioning my hand was up, so my question is not in the chat, but I had 2 points. First of all, thanks for coming and for presenting the information. I wanted to know what the 11 objectives or goals were that you kind of referenced and said, but I don't quite remember them. I was wondering if we could put them up again. And the other thing I wanted to say was I appreciate your response to the academic freedom question or issue. I'm wondering too, I got a little concerned when you said that shared governance could be, I mean, shared governance is a fraught issue. We understand that. But it's also a kind of fundamental value. And I hate to kind of see it buried under another topic, because in a sense it's its own issue and it's a big one. And I know it gives trouble on both sides, but that's kind of why it's so important. And I really would urge that be in its own category. I think it's an important value that's really fundamental to the way higher ed works in, across the country. So, so those are my two remarks.
I 100% respect that. I have to take responsibility. I told Terry to get rid of the chart that had the original 11 priority groups because we were trying to move on beyond that. And I wasn't, it was a personal thing. I wasn't involved in the creation of them, and I did not like the way that they were presented. And so we rejiggered that. And especially since some of them, there was no mention of anything like shared governance. There wasn't any mention of anything faculty based. There wasn't any mention of anything even really there. A lot of it was high level and student related, but it wasn't necessarily student centric. And especially one of the when I was here last time, one of the 11 priority groups was affecting savings, which I think was, is a stated goal of the consolidation, but I agree with all of you that should not be a goal for a school. But if you want me to, I can bring up Terry's original PowerPoint before I asked him to modify it. And here it is. There were 11 strategic plan initial priorities. Improving excellence in academics, improving improving social mobility, improving accessibility, improving the orientation experience, improving student support, making the college more user-friendly, establishing a common core of education, improving transferability, developing the workforce, making our administration more efficient, and affecting cost savings. Those were the 11 initial priority areas that the strategic planning council had developed.
That's great. Can I just comment on that for a second?
First
of all, I was really glad that the academic excellence is at the front. That's great. I'm wondering if, in addition to workforce, we could talk about creating engaged citizens, especially given what's been happening in the last 6 years in the country. I think if anything, that is an important goal of public higher ed, is to sort of preserve our democracy and have enlightened people to be able to vote well and, vote informed ways in any way. So, so I'm wondering if we, in addition, maybe it could even be the same issue, workforce development and citizenship. Engaged citizens, I think, is a term we've used before in the Board of Regents, and even under the old, when it was just the CSUs under the BOT. I just think it's kind of, you don't want to slip into just being about workforce. It's also about being, so anyway, I would just ask that be included.
You're right. And that kind of actually, if we just focus on workforce, that kind of plays into the stereotypes about what community college is supposed to be for.
Exactly.
Just for that. In my own.
And it overrides Gen Ed, which in a sense, Gen Ed's goal is the citizenship part, if you know what I mean. So
exactly. And in fact, in my own, we have a skeleton of the goals now. It's not just those three, but we have an outline that's going to become literature soon. And foregrounded for the deepening community goal is reviewing and extending our commitment to student civic education and citizenship and engagement. We certainly do better with the wording on that, but I think it's one of my personally, it's one of my pet passions, and so it's going to be in there.
Yeah, and I'd just like to see it elevated to a, where it's not in something else, but its own goal. Thank you very much.
So the one thing I'll just comment on, I think I pulled up the draft of the values. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So again, I hope that after you've had a chance to really look at it in more detail, that more of it will make sense. And if you still have the same feedback, then absolutely. But just to your point, Mike, if you look under mutual respect and the last sentence of it, as an institution, we commit to the spirit, structures, and processes of shared governance as a means to effectively harness the collective attributes of our college community. So we try to include pretty strong language about shared governance, but sort of the discussion was that shared governance was in some ways a reflection or a result of mutual respect. And so anyway, so those are the kinds of things that, you know, if you're sitting with us and we're noodling around about what all this means, but we're going to share all of this text with you, and I'm happy to hear and receive any other feedback that you may have.
Thanks. Can I just say one quick thing about that? I would just say that the shared governance doesn't come out of something else. It's kind of a fundamental principle in higher ed. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that it's there under mutual respect, but I would say that in a sense, the shared governance, and again, it's a problem because it doesn't always involve mutual respect. It should, but it doesn't always.
Right.
But I do think it's important enough that it in and of itself is just a value like teaching is in higher ed. So you know, you can do what you want with that, but I would just say that I appreciate your giving me the chance to talk about that.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's what this is about. That's what this is for. But I just wanted to highlight that was something that we all felt very strongly about, and thought that, you know, there are a lot of things that I guess could be talked about under mutual respect, but that was something that we specifically wanted to call out as something that was important as a value in CT State. So thank you for that. And like I said, if you don't mind, just like sending a quick note after you, so that we have you know, we can compile and document all the feedback that we get. That would be greatly appreciated.
Can you put your email in the chat too? Thanks.
Sure. I'm gonna stop sharing because if I multitask here, I'm still afraid I'm gonna break something, but that's okay. Okay.
And our next meeting is next Thursday, so we will definitely be having a discussion about what we haven't foregrounded that should be foregrounded and other modifications.
Chat. There we go.
And so I just want to emphasize also, I think I was next in the thing. So yeah, I want to emphasize also the importance of really foregrounding the shared governance. And in both the shared governance and the equity aspects of things, emphasizing that it is not attitudinal, right? It's about operational structures. So, you know, there's an extent to which the sort of declaration of an anti-racist orientation is wonderful. But we have to know whether it's possible to have that capacity, right? I mean, just historically, higher ed is very far from an anti-racist structure, right? It has a lot of things baked in that would move in the other direction. So what would that mean structurally? What kinds of power, you know, operations do we have to have in place? What kinds of voices do we have to have access to? That really needs to be sort of addressed if this is going to be made meaningful. And in the same way with shared governance, I think there's been a lot of sort of slippage between the idea of what shared governance is and confusing it with transparency, right? So like in the NETRI report, for example, the fact that things were presented even at this meeting, like the meetings and the time of the meetings and who was there, was all laid out very clearly to demonstrate that folks had buy-in, or folks had had an opportunity to weigh in. And yet, when there was communication between FAC and NETRI, the system's response was to characterize us as a rogue group of dissenting individuals, right? So it's like, which is it? When in fact, this is probably the only statewide body of faculty and staff with actual elected representation. So I say that to say, like, these things, especially when we're talking about equity and when we're talking about governance, require that there are power relations set in place to operationalize them. And in the absence of that, it's disconcerting because it doesn't always seem, or it's hard to be made sincere. So I just want to really, really encourage that aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, if I could respond, I think that the operationalization is critically important because, you know, at the risk of causing more controversy, it's my observation that different groups or even different individuals have different ideas about what shared governance is. And until we have a shared understanding of what shared governance is, then that is a situation that is ripe for a lot of either upset, defensive. You know what we are seeing, I think, is a lack of a shared understanding before we even get to shared governance and things like that. I would argue the same thing for academic freedom. So I guess one of the things, and we talked about this as we were, you know, thinking through, you know, the substantive change and all of that. One of the things that JB and I contributed was that after the strategic plan or you know, a number of these different kinds of activities, that there was going to have to be conscious, deliberate, intentional work on doing some work, you know, for example, aligning our planning processes. I would also argue that there needs to be some intentional, deliberate work. You know, at least we had the discussion on what we believe equity is, and you know, an equity statement came out of that. But there was intentional, deliberate discussion about how to define that for equity that I don't know that we've had in the same way for shared governance or academic freedom. So those are areas that I can't disagree with you operationalizing those, and then that will lead to initiatives, outcomes, metrics, holding ourselves accountable for the things that we said we would do. So this is the beginning. By no means is this the end, but we have to articulate that it's important, and that's part of the purpose of what we're doing here with the strategic plan. So I don't know who was next, David or Ron. Ron, okay. How you doing, Ron? I think you're on mute.
I
There
put
you
my
are.
hand down instead of clicking on the mic. So anyway, they both had to be done. So I just did them in the wrong order. But in any case, I think the big problem here is, you know, I've spent years, and Terry, you know this, I spent years leading the measurement of progress on Naugatuck Valley's strategic plan. That was the main part of my job was measuring progress on our strategic plan. And I know that measuring progress, let alone implementing, depends on the support of the implementors. Okay, the implementors have to be supportive of the plan, and they have to be supportive of the measurement process by which we determine whether we are making progress or not. And I think the biggest problem you guys are running up against, and the reason why you don't have a lot of faculty on your committee, is because faculty see this consolidation as a hostile takeover. There are a handful of faculty who are supportive and who are trying to get advanced in their career through supporting this work. Okay, but the vast majority, and they email me every day. They come up. I mean, I was elected by them. They come up and they talk to me every single day about the fact that they don't want this to happen. And I don't see how you convince them to participate in any of these initiatives without first winning them over in terms of how this is going to be good for faculty, how this is going to be good for their programs, how is this going to be good for our students. So far, they haven't seen anything that would make them believe that that is the case. And so therefore, this plan is dead in the water. As you know, without that support from faculty and staff, it's dead in the water. It's just words on paper. And again, you know, I want our institutions to succeed. I want us to create better experiences for students. I just don't know how you do that without when you have a hostile takeover, and what you guys are doing is part of that hostile takeover. So so I'll just I don't know, I don't even think that you can respond to that. I just wanted to get it out there.
This is the way that I will respond, and Kalina, you kind of hit the nail on the head. The tension that exists for me, and always has since I decided that I was going to be an educator, is that I am part of a system that is not set up, I'll put it that way, for everyone's success. That's where the fight is. How do we change? How do we grow? How do we evolve so that we can be the system that reaches to the ideals that we aspire to? And so again, I hear what you're saying. I don't think anyone is blind or naive or stupid, but this is the struggle, and it's something that as educators who want to and as educators who want equity for our students, but functioning in a system, what are we going to do in order to make that happen? So, JD and I, and maybe it means a little, maybe it means a lot, maybe it means nothing at all. But as we said before, our commitment to not only FAC, but really to every one of the institutions, faculty, staff, students, is that the way that we are doing this process, we are trying to live out the things that we believe in and aspire to. So people can believe us or not. The only thing that we can do is lead by our actions. So that's really my only response to that. And we can't go forward without a plan. We will mount the very best plan that we can, and we're just going to keep coming back. And as we get it done, as we get it better, as we hopefully demonstrate more of what we're talking about, maybe some people will change their minds. But we've known each other for a lot of years, and I do not doubt your sincerity, and you know that I am very earnest about doing things as right as we can possibly do them. So that's just the daily struggle.
Is there anyone else who has a question before I go?
I think it's you, Dave.
All right. I just have 2 points. One is, I agreed with Terry about one thing. Shared governance is a kind of vague and sometimes ill-defined term. And it's not quite 50-50 on every and all issues. For example, the administration has basically priority and control over appointing as many vice presidents and associate vice presidents and assistant vice presidents as they deem appropriate for the circumstances. And faculty may at most have a consultative role in that. Although I'm not sure if there are any faculty involved in the current search for the CSCC president. That said, there is an area where faculty have the predominance and the priority, and that's over curriculum and pedagogy. And that's one of the big issues in this whole consolidation, right? I mean, students first, when we put it bluntly, in a way that perhaps I haven't said, but my impression, and again, I'm sitting at the university and not at the community college, but listening to what I've heard over the last number of years, students first as an ideology, not as a project, but as an ideology, has kind of become something like faculty last, holding faculty somehow responsible, right, for the problems that you face, and we face as well at the universities, in terms of recruitment, retention, and graduation, narrowing the achievement gap between majority and minority students, and so forth. I mean, these are problems that we identify in common. But without having a clear statement of faculty control over curriculum and pedagogy through their elective representatives, and we'll come back to this when we look at the substantive change proposal and the structure that it proposes for curriculum committee and its relationship to college senate. But without having that, it seems to me that there's a major element missing, and that is going to have disastrous effects. So that's my first point. The second point, which I would like to see, is a statement of the maintenance, the preservation, or the continuation, choose the term you please, of the 12 community colleges in their current locales. What is one of the major stumbling blocks in this whole consolidation movement or system office and board plan? It is uncertainty as to what is going to happen to the 12 community colleges, which have grown up historically in the various locales and regions that they serve, which have a certain identity and following amongst their faculty, student, alumni, and residents in their surrounding areas. Right? And it's one thing to have an accreditation for Connecticut State Community College and perhaps have students using one OPEID number to get financial aid, right? So they can, in fact, if they change their residence, they can move from one community college to another, or from one campus, as you, I guess you would call it, to another. But as I said in my testimony to the Higher Ed Committee this week, I live out here in Colebrook. And when UConn decided, for strictly financial reasons, although there was a decline in student membership, to close the Torrington campus, there was a lot of local protest about it, but nothing could be done because it was just a campus. It had no accreditation on its own. The board of the UConn simply said, we're closing it, and that's that. I would hate to see that happen to Northwestern Community College or to any others in the unforeseeable near future. We don't know what's going to happen. We couldn't predict the pandemic. We can't predict the inflation that's happening now. There needs to be a guarantee for at least a minimum number of years, and I would say 10 to 15, that the community colleges which currently exist maintain their accreditation in coordination with the system office that is being developed in New Britain. And I think that's a second issue that I just want to bring to your attention.
No, and of course, all I can give you right now is words and benchmarks, and all I can give you for this is the next 3 years. I very much agree with those statements, and as a research person, all I can really add here is deploying a system for measuring the degree of shared governance in our system, and a benchmark for continued opening and operation and accreditation of all existing 12 main campuses. Again, I'm not the president. I can't force this to happen, but this will be going in front of them, and I'll put it in there, and they can say no, but I'll put it in there.
Fair enough.
To your point, David, shared governance is way more complicated than I think it's portrayed. If I could put it this way, just like faculty in a variety of different ways are deeply engaged in the administration of our institutions. We're talking department chairs and program coordinators, and all of the administrative work is not done only by administrators. How do we reconcile that, in areas where, as you correctly pointed out, faculty should have predominance? What is the role for administrators, student affairs folks, other folks, legislators, community members, business and industry? And again, my observation is that we have not had the really deep level conversation to articulate shared governance and academic freedom and all of those kinds of things. So students, what role do they play in all of this? So I actually look forward, Colleen, I agree with you 100%. I look forward to the conversation to operationalize these things. Until we have a shared understanding, I don't think we're going to get very far. So that is a conversation that I think is well worth having. So let's get to it. I hope that the strategic plan is a springboard or a jumping off point to do exactly the kinds of things that you all are talking about. See,
Are there
y'all are making me like feel like I'm a faculty member and an academic in that way. I'm starting to feel it again. Y'all need to stop. All right. Other questions about the strategic plan and the process where we are? Again, our intention, actually, I think we'll probably be requesting to come back in April. I think we'll be making some more progress between now and then. But certainly, coming back to you all as we move forward.
Thank you so much for letting us talk to you, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. In the absence of further questions, did I hear somebody with the last question?
I was just going to speak up and say I don't mind hanging around if you wanted to also talk to about the organizational changes and the NetSuite substantive change. I know there was some request from Kalina to have one of us stay around.
Oh yeah, you're invited for that discussion. In fact, you can stay for the rest of the meeting. One of the things that we practice is open meetings, and we invite participation of
I'm going to jump off for 2
other
minutes, but then I'll be
individuals.
back.
Okay, so let's go on to the BOR application and the response from NESHI on substantive change. I can just share with you, but you've all seen this, the email from CSU President Chang just a few days ago.
David, can you make it a little bigger, perhaps?
Yeah, let me see if I can.
Thanks.
How's that? And let me do this. No, I can't make that bigger. Okay. So perhaps Kalina, you could take charge of this part of the meeting.
Oh, I'm not the best one. I'll be perfectly honest. I was not able to make myself read the thing. So I don't know that I'm the perfect person to lead us through this. I know that you sent some questions to Chang about definitions, even to know how to understand this email. Oh, is it this email? Or the
Yes.
one that we got on Tuesday?
That's on Tuesday, which has a link
Did
to
you
the
share
joint
those
statement.
questions and whether you got an answer?
No, I didn't get an answer. The questions were, what is meant by accepted the substantive change proposal, and the term interim accreditation, and also the question of the 3 progress reports. And so recall that the substantive change proposal was the 26 or so page double column sort of colored brochure that was sent in, along with the nearly 200 pages of various appendices, all of which are available on the CSCU website. So that was one question.
Yeah, so you haven't gotten an answer with that, right? Because I know that when it was presented to the legislature, Sean Bradbury suggested that there was a very specific difference between the words accepted and approved. So that would be helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll just say I apologize, right? I think we probably all have a lot to say about this, and I think much of it is, what we've seen before. There hasn't been a lot of clarification. For example, the same graph that we've been seeing for I don't know how long that describes the hiring, the effects of the hiring of all the guided pathways advisors, which will magically raise, enrollment, is still there without more clarification of what the numbers actually are. The numbers that we've heard in the past have been that this would cost about 25, and they have adjusted it down, right? So there are fewer advisors now, but at the plan had been, it would cost about $25 million a year. Those advisors have been hired with COVID money from both HERF and ARPA thrown in by the state. That money won't exist in a year or two. So, and the only plan that they have to cover those salaries is that they will be so magically effective that they will raise enrollment to the tune of 25 million a year and pay for them for themselves. So that was, just looking at things like that, I saw my name on there like 3 or 4 times, presented as evidence of robust faculty support. I saw the phrase faculty ownership of their disciplines or their content or something like that, but happened to notice for the first time I was able to see who worked on philosophy content. There was not a single philosophy degree between them. I don't know how often that's happened, but we have looked at the content of other degree programs, and it was evident that if people who were qualified to put them together who did work on them, they probably haven't been in the field for at least 2 decades based on the terminology used, etc. So for all of those reasons, I apologize because usually I am the person who immerses myself in documents like this, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Well, I'm showing, if you can see it, the graphic on page 27 of the substantive change request form, right? And as you can see here, the decline of full-time equivalents in the community colleges from about, it looks like around 28,000 to about 26 or 27,000. And then you have here I think they call it a projection, a forecast. Sorry, a forecast. All right, of increases due. I mean, the colors are not too easy to separate, but one is due to guided pathways. Sorry, that's the advisors, and the other is due to PACT. And Paulina used the term magical. I would say arbitrary. There's no indication as to how these numbers were generated, other than by putting in percentages into a spreadsheet and then making a graph from it in Excel. So, I mean, that's definitely one issue here that I think we have. The other things that I noticed, and these are, I was looking here on page 11, right? Sorry, I've gone to 12. Right? It's hard to see, but you have here the sort of overall organogram. I'm looking for Terry Brown's CEO position. I couldn't find it here. But you do have here
Don't scare him.
Well,
central CT State College responsibilities, the regional responsibilities, which seem to be limited to grants, marketing, workforce, continuing education, and relationship to business and industry. But at that point, you have 3 presidents, right? And one of the remarkable things about this whole plan is not only do you have a president of the CSCU, you have a president of the CSCC, and then you have 3 regional presidents. And down here, not explicitly mentioned, would be the 12 CEOs and the various campus level activities. And when you look at, again, it's a diagram, so diagrams have their limitations, but you can see faculty have an input into curriculum, but for some reason, maybe the arrows got left off. There is a link to policy, but not an arrow, and similarly also to communication. So it's a funny structure. If one adds further, and this is on the next page, right? When you look at the top, and you have here the community, the curriculum college. I'm sorry, the college senate and the curriculum congress. Now, this is an unusual structure which has been around now as a proposal for some time. I mean, if you look at what we have at the universities, and I suspect what you have as well at the community colleges, curriculum committees report to their governing body, which is the Senate, shared governance issue. Here in this model, both report separately, and in fact are constituted separately, right? The college senate is constituted geographically by the representation from the 12 campuses, at which, by the way, faculty will be in a minority. And then the curriculum congress, based on the 6 super areas which have been defined in terms of curriculum, with 3 people from each of those areas, no two from the same subordinate discipline. And so that's a strange organization as well. And those are the things that, I happen to notice. So let me just repeat them. A forecast which doesn't seem to of increased enrollment, which doesn't seem to be based on any data or proper projection. The regional level, which is not clear to me. I mean, you have 12 former presidents who are now CEOs. You have then 3 regional presidents. You then have the CSCC president, and you have the CSCU president. I'm not quite sure if that makes any sense in terms of an organizational structure, especially with the roles of the CEO not apparently well defined. And then the whole question of the relationship between the Curriculum Congress and the College Senate. Those were 3 issues that I saw. I'll stop there. Let me just go back if I can, so I can see who's got their hands up. I think I saw Mike Shea. Sorry, yeah, Mike Shea, Lois Emmy, and Ron Picard.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that JD said in the chat that he could speak to the projections if there's interest. I wouldn't mind hearing. I presume it doesn't take that long. I wouldn't mind hearing what he had to say about your question or your point. But that's up to you, I think, to decide.
Okay, well, let's go on with the other questions and we can come back to that. Lois?
One comment, the things that you've been bringing up, David, about the curriculum committee not reporting to the whoever they are, governance group, has been around for a long time. We've been asking these questions for a very long time. There's nothing new in that substantive change. It's just the same old stuff over and over again. The question I do have, though, is that you've got something in the resolution about somebody has granted interim accreditation to the college that does not, the college. I don't know where that is. Where are you seeing that?
I'd have to look again. I'll get back to you.
It's not there as far as I can see.
I think you're right. That maybe just a misprint. Ron?
So this is a little tangential to the substantive change, but in responding to FAC's public comment and the other public comments that came forward with this substantive change, I was really disturbed by the way in which FAC was characterized. We were characterized as a group of malcontents that had difficulty and problems with our election process, and that we did not represent the faculty. I think that we as a body need to respond to that in some form in terms of resolutions, because to denigrate this elected body, which, as Kalina said earlier, is the only elected body for faculty throughout the system, I think that speaks volumes to the way in which the people who are leading this substantive change and this work views faculty and views shared governance. I mean, we are a shared governance body, and to say that we are not, and that we are not representative, and that our elections for our chairs are flawed or problematic, is just completely disrespectful of our democratic process that we go through. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say is that I'm very disturbed by the org chart, that there is no space for on-campus supervision of faculty, that the supervisors would be located in New Britain. I know that, Terry, you were a division leader. I know when you were a division leader, and when this wasn't just about you, obviously, it was about all division leaders. Faculty would constantly tell me that we didn't need division leaders, that they did nothing, that they were useless. And I would always respond, no, they actually do work, and they actually are useful. But apparently, whoever's leading this consolidation believes that they are expendable and that we do not need any leadership on our campuses. And so therefore, I guess I would ask Terry, did you think that when you were a division leader supervising faculty that you didn't do anything, that you were expendable?
I an unequivocal no. I was working very hard all the time, it seemed, and my wife would get very upset with me at different points because I was working too hard. What I will say about that is two things. So, um, depending on the size of the campus. There is within the campus structure. So there's a dean of faculty and students. Gateway, for example, will have an associate dean of faculty as well as an associate dean of, I think it's student development slash Title IX. And so the distinction that's being drawn in CT State is essentially the academic activity of faculty, and that's the supervision that I think you're referring to. That's going up through the deans and the areas of study and all of that, as opposed to what I'll describe as more the operational or maybe even a little bit the administrative work of faculty. So if a faculty member is not going to be there every day, someone has got to assign the courses to rooms, and that's not going to be done centrally. That has to be a campus-based process. So there's going to be a lot of interaction and interfacing between campus operations and some of the more, I'll just say, pedagogical and academic, those activities of faculty. But I do agree with you that how and when that happens and who's supposed to talk to who, when, and all of that, that is something that we need to get and be as clear as we can, because the last thing we want is faculty confused about where their resources, supports, and all of that are. That takes away from energy that we would prefer to be going towards classes and students and so on. So, that part is evolving. I don't mind saying that. And we're developing this understanding as we go. But there is, at least on the larger campuses, there is a specific position that's dedicated to working with faculty around things that are happening on the campus.
Francis?
I
Hey,
got- I
Kalina's
got a-
had her hand up.
Can I just follow up real quickly? I think you would agree, Terry, that replacing 4 division directors with 1.5 or 2 people is going to make their wives even more angry with them than your wife was with you.
We will need to work that out. I can't, there's part of the problem, well, not the problem, it's just a fact of things, is that a lot of this is going to be based on the relationship and the working relationships that we develop with each other. That's part of the functioning of a quote unquote matrixed organization. So relationships are evolving even as we speak. I would argue that the same is true with any system of organization that we've got. But because we are setting up a new organization, we are talking about different players and different relationships that will need to be developed. The healthier they are, the better it'll work. If they're not healthy relationships, I don't care what system we've got, it's not going to work. So again, I can't disagree with you too much about issues of communication and relationship and how is this going to work. That is evolving. This is something new. This has not been done before.
Francis, go ahead. I'm sorry, Carlina, were you first?
Sure.
Go
I
ahead.
just have some questions I think that are pretty quick answers, just to confirm some things. So, there are the part-time EAs and so on are looking at the org chart and saying, we're not in here, what does that mean? I think the answer has been that this concerns only full-time positions at the moment. Is that correct?
Yes, the 99.99% the org chart is reflective of full-time positions, and not only full-time positions, but sort of like college funded full-time positions by and large, grant-funded positions are not there, and so on. So that's correct.
Okay. And then is there an idea of when we get greater specificity about like what our department capacities will be like? You know, it's there's a lot of management on the chart, but not a lot of detail about like faculty and so on. Does that come out at any point in the future?
When you say departmental capacities,
Well,
what do
I
you mean?
shouldn't say department. I mean, that all changes, but just what the faculty might look like. Faculty numbers, placement,
Oh.
anything like that.
To my knowledge and understanding, right now the retirements that we're experiencing are driving me crazy. But that's not the focus of the consolidation. The numbers of faculty really are governed and determined by program size and health and viability and those kinds of things. So the faculty are who they are. They'll need to be filled in, after the considerations that we historically have done. So
Okay.
areas that are growing and healthy and new programs and all of that kind of stuff will need to add faculty as things shrink or programs. It's the normal processes that we've had historically.
Okay, I'm glad to hear it characterized that way. That's good.
Yeah. It's, I
Uh-huh.
will say I have not heard, and quite frankly, I would be chagrined if there was any like specific effort, like we're gonna get rid of faculty for the sake of getting rid of them. That doesn't make any sense. We've got areas in workforce as well as academics right here in New Haven that are very important to our employers. If we don't have people to teach them, how are we going to fulfill our mission? I have heard nothing of that particular kind. Now, people can argue about whether or not a program is healthy, and we're still going to do program review, and it's painful whenever a program might need to be closed or whatever. But those are processes that we've always had. So I think more of the impact, and I was in Tennessee when this was all proposed, but administrative positions are really being impacted, scrutinized, and rethought and reimagined through the course of the merger.
Yeah, well, and those administrative positions are expensive, so there are concerns about how we'll meet capacity at different campuses, especially if the plan is for it to be a single college with campuses, right? So, but that's whatever. We don't need to get into that too much. Another question is just in terms of like the way that divisions and so on were planned out. I don't think that was done with the consultation of any of the folks who run the programs, right? So some programs are within a division that doesn't necessarily suit it, right? So for example, I believe what culinary in Gateway is now what health. They're allied,
Yes,
right?
culinary is in our allied health and nursing division.
Right.
In
And the
other
department takes on a completely different tone if it belongs to a different division. They've cultivated themselves in one way.
Right.
And will have to cultivate themselves in a different way and create different partnerships in a different place. Is there room for now taking these kinds of things into consider, or was there a plan in place for taking those kinds of things into consideration with the org chart?
So the plan, if I could put it that way, and the alignment into the areas of studies is as you see them. So culinary, hospitality are in the business area, as opposed to Gateway, which I don't know if that's unique, but I do think it's pretty cool and special that's there. I think part of the struggle that we're having is that some of the things that have been formal may become informal in relationship, and those things that may have been relationship and discretionary are now becoming formalized. And so, to your point, Kalina, and again, I don't mind saying it here because I've said it in other places. When the accreditors for nutrition came and we talked about the connection with culinary and the synergies and all of those kinds of things, that was something that reflected positively on that program, and something that we are seeking to preserve even after the realignment of some of these disciplines. And so those connections, and let's be real, when faculty have gotten together and could be across divisions or areas of study and interdisciplinary and those kinds of things, um, the nature or the alignment of some of those conversations, a number of them would very well change with the new alignment. But again, I think that from an academic and the health of our programs and their relevancy and so on, faculty are still going to have to talk to each other. Some things may have to be more deliberate and intentional and effortful, but hopefully there are other things that are easier on the flip side. Yeah, again, this is the way, and I said it this way in my interviews. I'm just going to keep on saying it. However we're organized, that will get us some things, and then other things we will have to work at. With 12 colleges, that definitely gave us some advantages in some ways, and then there were things that we had to work at. A single college will get us some things, and then the other things we're going to have to work at. So, to your point, identifying and using this as an example, under the new arrangement, that is absolutely something we are going to have to work at. Is there an actual quote unquote plan for it? Not in that way. We're still in the process of getting all of this, moved forward and approved, and we just heard from Netchi. But I would encourage faculty to continue to consult and talk with each other and form those relationships and those synergies and propose courses and programs, interdisciplinary. That's what you all do. Keep on doing it. Your organization, the organizational structure does not prevent faculty collaborating with each other and proposing new and creative things that make sense for our students.
It does.
Okay, Francis, perhaps the last question.
Yeah, not to belabor the point, but we've been speaking a lot about programs. On page 28 of the substantive change request, I'm going to put this in the chat. Let me just send it to everybody. There's this statement. Connecticut State has also contracted with accounting firm Grant Thornton to engage in a cost and revenue analysis of credit and non-credit academic programs. The review is evaluating program financial contributions, and I guess that should be will determine a standard for future financial decisions. So this is the very thing many of us assume was going to happen. We become a for-profit institution where, at least to some extent, it looks like the decision to keep or delete programs is going to be based on some sort of bottom line. And again, it doesn't look like faculty are going to have much of a say here, but perhaps I'm wrong about that. But this is concerning, to say the least.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I can say, number one, that the president of the system initiated that independent of the consolidation. He has a strong interest in, or a strong urging by the Board of Regents, I believe, to review the costs of programs, regardless of whether they're consolidated or not. So I absolutely agree with your concern. We should not be, we should not be looking at our programs as cost centers. He's going to do that anyway. And that's, as somebody who provided some of the data that I can tell you that the methods we were using are methods that are ones that do our best to actually distribute the value of those programs, regardless of say how many. It's not just about how many graduates they produce or how many high-end positions you can getting out of that program. So it's obvious, like things like English and math. that you can't have the rest of the college without those things. And we're not going to pretend that that's not true. Nursing does cost us a lot of money, and it's not, even if it's not necessarily a profit center, it is a major draw for and a major source of relevance for the community colleges that already offer nursing programs and for CT State. So I can't say that cost is not going to come into a discussion about the viability of future programs. All I can say is that it's independent of the consolidation, and it's we're doing our best, at least here on the research side, to make sure that we don't make simplistic measurements as to the value of a program. And especially when it comes to liberal arts and sciences, we are recognizing how much those students fuel other majors as well. They have to go through those courses to get to those other programs. So we're not ignorant of that fact, and I just want to put that out there. But if you would have to talk to, I think, Ben Barnes and President Chang to get a better idea of exactly what they plan to do with that data.
Thank you. And I definitely think we need to have that conversation soon.
That's an issue that I can bring up at the Finance and Infrastructure Committee. Okay.
So the only thing I would add to that is that the best understanding we can develop, not only of the cost, but also of the benefit. You know, to JD's point, a lot of people don't take that into consideration as well. Some of it will be financial, and we do need to understand that. If we go before the legislature and say we need X number of dollars, we need to know what we're talking about, both in terms of cost as well as economic impact. That is a consideration, but it's wider than that. And that's a conversation that I think needs to, that everyone, could have some contribution to. So, again, throw that on the heap with academic freedom and with, shared governance and the other things we talked about. We have to have some sophisticated conversations about all of these issues, because we're talking about the futures and the opportunities for our students and for our communities. So
I can't speak to how much revenue we make by mowing the lawns to answer Brendan's question, but I do know at some point if the lawns got too high, it would probably adversely affect revenue.
Okay, Francis, did you have something more, or?
Just a closing point. And faculty are obviously in the best position to explain all the intangible benefits of these programs and courses too. But unfortunately, the faculty voice is being essentially ignored. So we've got a serious problem.
I can tell you, I don't want to work for an institution that doesn't value liberal arts and sciences just because it doesn't bring in money. I'll tell you that right now. And I will tell that to anybody who asks and anybody who doesn't want to hear about it too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, perhaps that's a point where we can now segue to other items on the agenda. I think that's a pretty lengthy discussion. JD?
Can we just see? I was wondering if JD wanted to speak to those projections. Is that
Yes.
Yes. Sorry.
Yes, and just a quick statement. Number one, the projections came right out of my office, and I was tempted to include rainbows and unicorns in my model, but SPSS would not process them. I can tell you two things, and yes, they are optimistic. The optimism comes from when it comes to PACT and when it comes to guided pathways advising. The optimism is based on academic research and experience in other systems where we reduce the debt load for students and where we provided an advising and schools where they provided an advising ratio of up to 250 to 1 or down to 250 to 1 and included full wraparound advising, which is the point of guided pathways advising. That's the improvement on FTEs was based on studies that showed that over a certain amount of time, that is the type of boost you could get from your baseline if you implement those procedures. The baseline, and that was a very simple calculation based on where things would likely keep going if, where we believe things would be going if we kind of drew a trend from before COVID and then what would have continued after that. Obviously, COVID happened, and we lost 17% that first pandemic fall, and another 6.7%, I believe, that second pandemic fall. We are expecting some bounce back once, at least, I keep saying once the pandemic's over. It doesn't feel like that's ever actually going to happen, but it does seem like people do have an urge to pretend that things are back to normal, and hopefully that pretension will also apply to enrollment trends. So those are the fuel that went into those projections. I can also say that with projections, there's always a significant margin of error. It could be up to 10% plus or minus. And I do stand by the figures that this is the best average we have. But they are forecasts, and we'll continue reviewing the trends. I can say that looking at the cohorts that have benefited so far from Guided Pathways Advising and PACT, we've actually seen a larger than normal increase in the impact it had on retention. Several percentage points, sometimes double-digit percentage points increases in retention rates for those cohorts. And that's just retention. PACT is also hopefully going to draw some new students, especially if we expand it. And there is some support for expanding PACT to lower credit levels and making it more equitable. But we are already seeing retention gains. Whether those retention gains will continue is something we'll have to pay attention to. But so far, fall to spring retention for the PACT and the Guided Pathways Advising cohorts has seen a significant increase. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Okay, JD, there was a question.
Yeah.
What is your official title? What is your exact title?
Yeah, sorry about that. I am the Interim Associate Vice President of Institutional Effectiveness and Planning.
For CSCC, I take it.
For Connecticut State, yes. I am also, in a technical sense, still the Senior Research Associate for the Office of Research and Systemic Effectiveness for the System Office, CSU System Office. But I am on loan as interim to CT State for now.
Okay, and could you put your email into the chat room in case anybody wants to contact you?
It is up there. It's up there.
Good. Okay.
And Ron, to talk broadly about the relationship between retention and success, and 100%, you can have retention without success. That's what we saw when we implemented the PA 1240 revisions to math and English placement and math and English remedial instruction, is that we saw an improvement in, not retention specifically, but we saw an improvement with math and English scores, but we didn't actually see any downstream effects. So Ron's right, retention's nice, but it's not what we're going for here. We're going for improved, we're going for improved success. However, define success, define it as graduation rates, transfer out rates to a 4-year, improved employment outcomes. We're not seeing that yet, and we will keep an eye on that. But absolutely right, retention's not everything. But if we're just talking about FTEs for the short term, we do stand by the research, and we will continue to see if those research, if the research holds firm, the assumptions hold firm.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and you're of course welcome to continue on with the rest of the meeting.
And can I
let's
just say
go on
thank
to-
you to both of you, because I kind of hijacked you a little bit longer than you planned. So thank you for hanging out with us.
Yeah,
No worries. And
problem.
email me if you have any further questions about either the strategic plan, or if you have questions about research. My goal for institutional effectiveness is that research will continue to stay at the campuses. That's how we're doing it. So you could always talk to your campus professional, but that doesn't mean you can't talk to me either. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And can I mention one more thing before we leave this topic,
Go ahead.
David? Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that it keeps being repeated. It certainly was repeated at the NECHI sort of forum, or not the NECHI, sorry, the Higher Ed Consolidation Committee forum yesterday on the consolidation. It keeps getting repeated that one of the ways to increase retention, to make the workload more palatable for working adults is to, instead of having them take, say, 4 courses over the course of 15 weeks, take 2 sets of 2 courses over the course of 15 weeks, which should be the exact same course load with midterms and finals scrunched up that much closer together, right? And the accelerated pace of a course, making it sometimes much more challenging. So if we're expecting to be delivering the exact same course material and the same quality and expect the same quality of work, that's a very dangerous thing to keep saying, especially if we're saying it to students. And I'm very familiar with programs around the state who cater mostly towards working adults, who do these accelerated courses. There are some things you just cannot teach in that time period. I know I feel like sometimes we have students who come in from universities who take like our summer and winter courses, and they know what they're getting into, and they clear their schedules and they ace it. And it's an amazing advantage to them. But then there are students in our system who don't understand what the time commitment actually is, and fail miserably. And we do such a disservice to them. So I hope that the folks who keep repeating this, I think Allison Buckley keeps repeating this, understand that that's not true, but certainly that our advisors never suggest that to our students, because it's a way of sabotaging them terribly.
Yeah, again,
And that, I think, is part of that projection, that we're going to somehow hold on to students, or that they're going to go from part-time to full-time because we've given them 7-week courses, and that should never be the case.
Yeah, no, again, I think it's way more complicated than that. If you're going to do that, then there needs to be, for example, the advising you mentioned, there needs to be infrastructure, there needs to be support, there needs to be understanding. So my strong recommendation, we actually did some of this at my previous institution. If you're going to enter into this venture, then you need to go into it with the appropriate supports and investments and infrastructure and all of that in order to make it successful. So I'm not going to sit here and say that it doesn't work or can't work for students. It does and it has, but where it does and it has, there's a whole lot more that's happened in order to make those kinds of things successful. So again, if that's something we're planning on doing, then we need to have serious conversation about what that means and how we're going to position our students, as well as our faculty. I mean, and administrators, anyone who is involved in the experience of our students. How are we going to position them to position our students to be successful? That is a serious conversation.
Okay, any further comments? All right, well, we've devoted probably a bit more time than Terry and JD had expected, but I think that there are interesting elements of conversation, whether they be points in common or points of difference. And I think we're going to have a further discussion of this at this meeting, but also at our coming meetings as well. There's a 1.5-year transition that is now being added upon the 5 calendar years that have already been spent. And I think we need to look in some considerable detail on some of the issues, such as shared governance, faculty control over curriculum and pedagogy, issues of the structure of the proposed college, the relationship between centralization and local autonomy, and a number of issues, a variety of which have been discussed or begun to be discussed at this meeting. Well, let's pass on to the report of the chair and the vice chair. For the chair's report, I'm just going to say briefly, as you know, speaking now as co-chair for the universities, the AUP has agreed to the tentative agreement, right? And that's going to be put before the membership. And I think probably the same thing is happening for the community colleges. I just want to say one point. In either March or April or May of last year, of 2020, when I just first joined the board as an ex officio non-voting member, one of the members of the special committee on collective bargaining, there's only 2 people, members of the board on that committee, made the claim that the slogan for the negotiations was "everything is on the table." And at that time, I pointed out that I thought, A, it was inappropriate to discuss strategy for negotiation at a meeting of the board, but B, that was wrong, that you have to build upon the accomplishments and the achievements and the structure of the collective agreement and improve it, rather than, as happened in the initial offers, particularly to the universities, take it apart, removing university-wide committees, a 0-0-0 pay increase, rescinding of the previous pay increase, 12 furlough days, and so forth, all of which, created the uproar, to put it mildly, that subsequently happened. On the positive side, it certainly reinforced the faculty determination to defend their rights and to defend a collective agreement that was beneficial to their whole community. And so I think that's, an issue not for us to discuss in terms of details here. I mean, each of the members of this committee will be voting in terms of their own union with respect to approving those contracts. But I think there's definitely a lesson here that kind of negative and reactionary attitude towards faculty, which was a part of what was the worst of Students First, has to be overcome. The second point I want to make is just the resolution that I proposed, and I think it's important that we say something on this issue, namely the question of what is happening in the Ukraine. And so I'd like to propose a resolution for us to approve. I think it's pretty straightforward. Whereas Russia has engaged in aggression against the Ukraine in violation of the Charter of the United Nations, whereas Russian armed forces have attacked civilian centers, including schools and hospitals, in violation of international law, whereas faculty, staff, and students are endangered at all Ukrainian colleges and universities, be it resolved that the Faculty Advisory Committee calls upon the Board of Regents to 1. Express its solidarity with the Ukrainian people, 2. Request of appropriate government agencies that the leaders of Russia, in particular its president, Minister of Defense, and Foreign Minister, be charged with war crimes, specifically crimes against peace and waging of aggressive war, crimes against the civilian population, use of prohibited weapons. And 3, provide free access to CSU colleges and universities for any Ukrainian refugees. So I know I'm chair of the meeting. I'm not sure if I can make the motion, but I would like to make it at this point. Is there anybody who would want to second it?
I'll second that, David.
I don't know that there's anyone who wants to discuss it in any detail. We are, of course, all disappointed by what has happened. And it seems it's important that we submit this to the Board of Regents for its next meeting.
This is Jen Long. I just had a quick question.
Mhm.
Are we saying the Ukraine or are we saying Ukraine? I know that's been a question that's come up a lot.
More properly, it is just Ukraine.
It's just Ukraine, I believe, not the Ukraine.
Yeah, I didn't want to be pedantic, but that is
No.
the more proper usage.
Good. I've just corrected that.
We love anything pedantic around here.
Okay, anything further? If not, can I call the vote?
David?
No,
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, I can't see you.
It's Mark.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I just had just one thought about it, well, overall support of it. But I can just hear the voices also saying, why Ukraine when there's other wars going on too? Specifically, why not a resolution for Pakistan, for Gaza? There's lots of other wars going on, so.
I concur. I mean,
Palestinians, what I was trying to think of, not Pakistani,
yes.
Palestinians.
And a lot of people have noted that, there's a lot more concern for a basically white European community, which is suffering the ravages of war, than was the case when similar actions, the circumstances might have been somewhat different, were undertaken with respect to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
Exactly.
But I think, we have to deal with things one at a time. And if we want to come back with something further about the status of universities in the Gaza Strip, I know that it's terrible, then I think we should do that at a later point, at another meeting. Perhaps you want to work on that. I would certainly be interested in doing something on that as well.
David, it's Lois. I
Yes.
do have a question about the last statement where it says provide free access to CSCU colleges and universities for any Ukrainian refugees. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, we have done that in the past when there was the hurricane and the damage in Puerto Rico. Provide these CCSU and I believe other CSCU institutions provided free tuition and fees for students coming in from Puerto Rico. So this would be the same thing.
All right, okay.
Free access, tuition and fees.
Yeah, I just wanted to verify that. My concern is that if we only talk about Ukrainians, there are a lot of student refugees in Ukraine. A number from Nigeria, for example, that are trying to get out as well. Why would we specifically limit this to Ukrainians?
How about that? For any Ukrainian refugees or other refugees from Ukraine. So that would cover the foreign students who are there.
Why don't you just say for any refugees from Ukraine?
There it is. Other comments?
I have a comment. One, if we are going to vote on this, rather than voting this as a whole resolution, can we split this up to 3 different points? And the second one, I'm not huge on Robert's rule, but doesn't Robert's rule say something along the line where you can't vote on any items that's financially driven at the same meeting that's brought up?
That is what? Financially driven?
Or something with money or numbers. I thought I remember that being a Robert's rule, but I can't say I'm huge and know all the rules.
I'm not familiar with that.
The financial impact isn't something that's under our purview either, right? It's a recommendation. Not that I know what the rule, but
I would like to see this split up as a resolution and voted on as opposed to one, especially the 3 points.
Sure, we can do that. So there are 3 points at the end, and there's a request to break them into 3 parts. Again, I'm at a disadvantage here because I can't see anybody while I have I'm sharing the screen. Are there other comments?
This is Brendan. I'm not sure if my mic is working, but
It is.
okay, thank you. I'm just wondering about whether there's also any divestment issue we could take with this. So I don't know exactly where our reserves are held, but I just wanted to put that on the table since there's a lot of withdrawal of financial resources happening when it comes to Russia right now. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Okay. Others? Well, let's proceed to a vote on each of the 3 items as requested. So the first one is, I guess the whereases are there for all 3. The first point would be express its solidarity with the Ukrainian people. Those in favor say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Abstention? Okay, that's approved. Secondly, request of appropriate governmental agencies that the leaders of Russia, in particular as President, Minister of Defense, and Foreign Minister, be charged with war crimes, crimes against peace and waging aggressive war, crimes against the civilian population, and use of prohibited weapons. Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
I'm abstaining, Patrice.
Okay, 2 abstentions.
Brendan's abstaining.
3. And 3, provide free access, tuition and fees to CSU colleges and universities for any refugees from Ukraine. Those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Patrice,
Okay. And abstentions?
Abstain, vote.
Okay. All right. Well, then we've approved that that resolution with the vote as we saw. It was kind of a roll call vote in a certain sense. So I'm going to try and stop sharing and go on to the report of the vice chair.
Before you do, could I ask a question in regards to what you've mentioned, the first point with the AAUP agreement?
Yes.
Do you have a date on when the vote's going to be with AAUP on that one?
It was in an email. I'll have to look at it for it in just a second. I believe it's coming up.
It will be the week we come back from spring break.
Yeah, it's March 21st to March. I just had it.
25th.
It's somewhere around March 21st, March 25th, something like that.
Yes, that's correct. I just
21
saw
through
it.
25. Yes.
Thank you.
David, I just want to say, I think there is, I mean, I'm not, this has nothing to do with the vote we just took, but for future, I do think there's something about, you can't vote on certain things you have to give one meeting on certain kinds of proposals. So I don't know what they are, but it might be worth asking someone who knows Robert's rules better what those are, so we know in the future.
Yeah, we'll check that. Brendan, did you have your hand up still?
Yeah, there's also another vote. Once we vote on the new contracts, it has to be approved by the General Assembly. And I'm not really clear on when that's going to happen, but maybe sometime in April. So I just wanted to mention that also.
Yes, it's going to have to be approved actually by the Board of Regents. I imagine they would do that in executive session. And it then goes as a package, all of the CBAC agreements, and there are more than 20 of them, would then go as a package to the legislature for approval. So there's 3 steps. The membership approving their particular contracts, the Board of Regents approving those of the affecting CSCU. So there's at least 5 of them and perhaps more. And then the block vote by the legislature. Okay, Kalina, do you want to do the vice chair's report? Or any matters you have to bring up?
Sure. So I think CCIC is its own item on the agenda, right? So I will do BOR ASA, which was this morning, and a little bit about the legislature, which is not, it's not a full report, but I'll just mention what's happening there. So as far as BOR ASA and the issues that I would say have a sort of broad impact would be on page 30 of today's agenda. There's a modification to the course withdrawal period for accelerated courses or shorter terms. So just to put it back in line, or not to make it longer than the course withdrawal deadline for 15-week terms. So you can see it there. It's just to kind of get those in line. It's fairly minimal. And then on page 35, you'll see the CSEC aligned program approvals. That's 39 programs and certificates that were approved today, and they were the ones that passed out of CCIC last week. In terms of the legislature, so there's a lot of stuff that affects us. As you mentioned, the contracts will go there in April, both the House and Senate. And there are some bills that our different unions are supporting that are worth mentioning. For example, I know that Four Cs and AUP are pushing for mental health counselors at the level of the ICAS or IACS. I forget what the acronym is, but the sort of recommended level, which is one full-time professional counselor for every 1,000 to 1,500 students at every public college and university campus. So that's there. It doesn't have a bill number. It's probably going to come up in the Senate as a part of a big old package that I haven't found yet. So but that exists. Food and housing insecurity have been AAUP priorities. Food and housing insecurity for students specifically, having sort of processes that allow that sometimes things stand in the way of students specifically. So having processes that get around that. I think you all know that there was a bill proposing that David and I, or the chairs and vice chair of the FAC, have a voting role on the BOR, just like the students do. I'm not sure that that will go through, and I'm also really not particularly concerned with it. I think at the moment there are just so many things going on that will directly affect, you know, what actually happens in the system. Our ability to vote is not the one. But the conversation actually moved rather to whether it would be possible to have retired faculty vote on the board, perhaps. And the reason that it went to that was because there was an extensive discussion from Shaw Bradbury that called into question our representation, whether or not the voting process that put us in our places, and also you know, got us to chair and vice chair were actually valid. He worried that faculty may not have the capacity to sort of, what was the word he used? Firewall, to put, you know, to extricate themselves from the kinds of issues that they should not be involved in if they were voting members, not in the way that the current members of the board, who are, you know, lawyers and stuff, actually do, which I found really strange, given that the committee, the board committee that came up with the proposals for contract negotiations consisted of precisely 2 people, and one of them is that Jackson and Lewis principal. So you would think that that would be a conflict of interest, right? So I think we can at least meet that standard. So the conversation there was very disappointing, and I think not quite truthful, and really painted us as a group in a bad light. So just saying, all of that happened. It will be a big fight to push that one forward, and may not be the fight to have right now. In terms of coalitions, of which, you know, we are a part, you know, there are, CVAC is pushing for things like automatic refills and continuous recruitment, and their racial justice aims include just the observation that public sector jobs have traditionally been a path to the middle class, and one of the most viable paths to the middle class for Black and brown folks. And having that, I think we've all suffered from understaffing at our campuses, and we know about understaffing in other areas of state service. And I think when we think about our student needs, you know, whether it's in other areas of state service or in our own campuses, that seems to be something that's quite relevant to us. So those bills come up in labor on Tuesday. And then Recovery for All is focused on like tax equity and raising revenue for places like our system. There was a tax incidence report presented to the Finance Committee just this morning, kind of talking about how those things can be adjusted. So, and then most sort of central, I think, is HB 3500. Sorry, 5300. I said it backwards. HB 5300, which is the mergers and closures bill. The hearing for that in higher ed was on Tuesday, this past Tuesday. As of, I think I shared it all with you all. As of like the end of that night, 63 people had submitted testimony of some kind, whether written or verbal. And there's probably more coming in now. But there was quite a bit of support for that on Tuesday. And I thought the testimony was quite compelling. And I think I made note for some of you, Patrick Sullivan's testimony, sort of characterizing what we face as what he calls, what is referred to as racialized austerity. I think it's something that we've all been kind of saying, but the term just seemed to like pick it out really well. So worth a look because he actually goes through the data and actually demonstrates how access to full-time faculty drops as levels of Black and brown students increase, etc. All right, so that's it for me and the legislature. I should I mention there's an event, I'll just put it in the chat, on March 30th. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay. Let's go on then to item 5, which was fee increases for community college students. I think that was an information item. I don't know if we had any further comments on it. The increase was approximately in the $250 range. Ron?
It's actually a tuition increase, I believe, David,
tuition.
a fee increase.
Sorry about that.
But I do think that, you know, given how much money is being wasted on guided pathways managers and other administrative positions that aren't even on our campuses, I think it's really offensive that we are making students pay for these mistakes.
Yeah, and I will say that, so this was for community college students only. Right in the resolution, what it says was we attempted to save money through attrition, didn't save enough, and now we're raising students' tuition, which to me is we have understaffed your offices, and even with that reduction of services, we're asking you to pay more, which I did not think was an excellent thing to do, especially right now, especially with all the disruption, with everything that's going on. They intend to propose the exact same increase for CSU students next month. So same thing, 5% for CSU students. And I think also, I think it's worth noting that the amount of money raised by this increase. So, you know, there was a lot made of the fact that Pell students really wouldn't, the way it was presented to the student advisory committee was that it was characterized as, and I'm going to quote here, Pell and PAC students would see no difference, which is simply false, right? Their refund checks will be decreased by exactly the amount of the tuition increase. And for students at the Pell level, you know, it is the opportunity cost, it's the decreased income of going to school that is significant. So that $100 a semester can be significant. And I think there was an extent to which that was missed, even though they did make a great effort to set aside so that the total amount that's going to be raised by this tuition increase is $7 million. In the greater scheme of things, like, it's really not that much, right? So 2 million of that is going to go towards, okay, yeah, that's what I thought, Ron. There's a lifetime cap on Pell. So we are taking more out at the community college level, leaving less for more expensive schools. But that said, yeah, it's $7 million. 2 million of it will be reserved for other kinds of aid for students who don't qualify for full Pell or whatever. So I think that that is helpful, but I'm not quite sure how it works. Like, I literally don't know how it works. So it feels as if we're taking money from Pell students and giving it to students who are a little bit less needy, but it probably doesn't actually work that way. I'd like to believe it doesn't. But all of that to say, $7 million, I think it was a terrible time to do this. So, and we have at least one student who tried to present to the board to say how this was going to affect him, who was not able to do so because he made the request less than an hour later than the deadline, which is a day before the meeting. He could have been accommodated. I don't know who else. I know, but he knew me, so he reached out to me. So I don't know. I just really, I found that very, very disappointing.
Fran?
And just to follow up, also, the system is planning to raise the community college tuition 5% every fiscal year for the next 6, from FY 23 through 28. So this isn't a one-time increase.
And I can add, as I was at the finance committee when this was brought up, I didn't have very much to say because most of the discussion was the same individual who had instigated the collective agreement clawbacks. His intervention at the Finance Committee was that the board was not raising tuition enough. And I need say nothing more.
Whose hand?
So that's something to watch for in the coming years as well, because obviously it adds up. We're talking about over $1,000 within 4 years.
Mhm. Whose hand is up?
The 5%
see.
across entire CSU and CC is for the next 5 years. That for the next 5 years with 5% increase, is that CC and CSU or just one or the other?
For the moment, it's just the community colleges, but I imagine that the CSU tuition and fees are going to be up next.
Thank you.
Okay, if we don't have further comment on that, that's something to retain. Proposals for funding of CSCU to the legislature. Again, that's kind of in Kalina's bailiwick. We have been proposing full funding for public higher education without any increase to student fee and tuition burden. And that's basically our policy.
I guess I'll just say this, that I think it would be useful for a group of us who are interested in this to develop the kinds of questions that would be necessary to get from the system, so that we can make an intelligent and informed sort of picture of what it means when we say full funding, right? And get a sense of what the sort of baselines or goals for what we think might be a good place to start, right? Like, so are we trying to provide for our current students the kind of level of support that we provided for students in this decade, or what it might be? Like, what are we tying it to? And what is the number? How is it achievable? And how do we connect it to other things? So if anyone is interested, I think we have support actually from the system office to get some of these numbers. And I think that's a great opportunity to do some of that work. I know that there are folks in this group and there are economists outside of this group also who might want to weigh in on the best ways to start getting at that kind of number. But that should be a project for us this semester, and I'd like to know who would like to participate in that project. I hope so, Brendan. Great.
Yes, we need the economists.
Yes.
Well, I suppose I have to add my name too, since I'm on the Finance Committee.
Yep. I mean, that already is a good start. Like, we don't want to get too huge, because right now we're just in the gathering of information kind of phase. So that's great, but if anybody else wants to jump in, let me know, but I will just chat with the two of you and see what we could do. So great, thank you.
Okay, community college CCIC, and that would be Kalina.
Mhm. So I'll be pretty quick with this. So again, the stuff that went through ASA this morning, and what did I say, 39 programs and certificates. So that was approved at the last CCIC. And then the majority of, and the shared governance proposal was also approved at the CCI at that meeting, but just in time for the NECHI meeting the next day. So that was done. And then the majority of the conversation was about different policy changes. So I'll just very quickly list them for you, just to know, whether there's some feedback you might want to give. So there's a change to the dean's list for the Consolidated Community College that makes it so that a withdrawal no longer stands in the way of eligibility for the dean's list. So that's just supposed to be an improvement there. The new sort of students' rights portion of it, I think what was interesting was that even appeals processes or anything like that ends with the campus CEO. So the processes for students are supposed to be entirely internal to the campus. Fresh Start has been reworded and redefined, but mostly for the purpose of making sure that students are aware that a fresh start is academic only. It doesn't apply to financial aid. So it's actually been renamed Academic Fresh Start so that students know. And then they're going to ask students who opt into it to attest to the fact that they understand that it's only academic. The plan is also to reduce the waiting period. I think the current waiting period for Fresh Start is 2 years. They want to reduce it to 1 year. And because it's a one-time only deal, instead of students opting into Fresh Start and then seeing if they succeed, they will only be sort of opted in or given the opportunity to get in after they've completed 9 credits. And it is apparent that they will actually be successful. And it's after 15 Fresh Start credits that you're eligible for a degree under that program. And then the intention, again, also is to have the new governance structure run in parallel to the old structure for about a year. So they expect that the 6 area of study deans should exist by fall of 2022. And then they will guide the elections get those elections going for the new governance structure. And then fall of 2022, they want to have like 1 or 2 discipline meetings and then some more in the spring so that folks start getting a sense of what a discipline is. But the associate deans won't be in place yet. Okay, so that's all I learned at CCIC.
Okay, any comments or questions?
When are they planning on having those associate deans in place, Selena?
I'm not sure. I know for sure not this coming fall.
Well, how would they have discipline meetings without the deans that are overseeing those disciplines?
Unless I got it wrong, it's the area of study deans will be conducting those for now.
Okay, so you're I get it. You're talking about associate deans, not the actual deans. I think I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lois?
Did I miss something? What's the difference between area of study deans and discipline deans?
I'm not sure I made a distinction. I may have just said the same thing 2 different ways, maybe. I'm not clear on what's what. So these are just from the notes that I took, and I'm pretty sure they said area of study deans will be in place by fall. So I don't think there's any difference.
The problem here, of course, is the elimination of department chairs and having curriculum groups report directly to administration.
Right.
This is one of the issues that I think we need to come back on.
I'm assuming this all has to be virtually.
This came up at our union meeting, our AFT union meeting, and they cannot get rid of department chairs are in our contract, so they cannot get rid of them without impact bargaining, and so they're planning on spending the next year doing impact bargaining on that.
Mm-hmm. All right, we need to follow that. That's clearly a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, anything further? If not, COVID-19 situation. Well, as you know, we got that message from President Cheng that basically as of April 4th, the COVID reopen plans that were developed in June 2020 will expire. And that applies, as explained in this email, which is from yesterday, I believe. Mask mandate will come to an end. Social distancing will come to an end, as well as testing of employees and students and contact tracing. So it's also stated in this, right? And I think it, as the Omicron variant winds down and is not at least currently being replaced by something equally or more virulent, we are coming to that period of time when the pandemic becomes, as I say, endemic. That said, the President Cheng also indicated that there was conversation with DPH, campus leaders, and COVID coordinators for a consensus. But as is, I think, evident, there was no consultation with the FAC, even though it was our working group which had originally proposed the vaccine mandate. And I've written a letter to President Cheng stating that there is a significant omission in his message, and I'll quote here. I note that you mentioned conversations and consensus of various constituencies in your March 10th statement on COVID protocol changes, and wish to add the following. Had there been any consultation with the FAC, we would have pointed out that your announcement should have included a statement about vaccines, and in particular a recommendation for everyone to get boosters. That was point 6 of the FAC resolution and recommendation of January 10th, 2022, which was sent to President Cheng and which he acknowledged. As the virus continues to circulate and boosters have been demonstrated to be needed for further protection, I recommend that you issue a further email to that effect, along with information that there will be continued vaccine clinics at the constituent institutions for that purposes, as well as initial vaccinations. I did get a response from Alice Pritchard, recognizing that in fact that had been an omission in the statement, and as I pointed out to both President Cheng and her, had they consulted with us, we would have noted that immediately. All I did was get a half-hour advance notice that the email was going out, and that was clearly not sufficient. That says, I emailed back that I await the clarifying email from President Cheng and as well a press release on the matter. Clearly, the booster issue is an important one. I mean, there may be other issues, but that one was entirely omitted. So we'll see if indeed there is a further email on the matter. How it's been presented in the press, even in the Connecticut Mirror, is that, well, all of the measures have been dropped. But that recommendation for boosters is an essential one if we're going to maintain health and safety on our campuses. And that's a recommendation. That is not yet mandatory. Any comments on that? Ron?
Well, I heard, I got confirmation from a faculty member this past week or last week that the requirement for weekly testing was not being enforced. That if students weren't testing, they were staying in the classes, even when they knew about that students weren't being tested and weren't vaccinated. They were not being removed from class. So really, at least by dropping these protocols, we are actually being honest with ourselves, because the only thing that I could see that was somewhat being enforced were masks. Although, up on the 7th floor where the administration is, I'd go by office after office after office, and nobody was wearing masks up on that floor. So at my campus anyway, it didn't appear that many of the protocols at this point were being followed, and so therefore we might as well drop them because at least now we're being honest about it.
Any other discussion? Okay, well, I'll follow up with the question of the boosters and the recommendation to that effect. Next item on the agenda is the joint meeting of the FAC and the Board of Regents. I don't know if we have anything actually to add at this point. There was a meeting, a joint meeting of the Board of Regents and the Student Advisory Committee, where they largely talked about the tuition fee increase. We should be thinking about what issues, and of course, you know, in the 1 hour time period allocated to these joint meetings, that's not very much time, as we see from today's meeting. It takes us a lot longer to sharpen our pencils and get our pens ready. Nonetheless, we should be thinking about what it is we would like to propose as content for the next meeting. But we can come back to that at a future meeting unless we have some suggestions now.
Well, and David, I should say that there was a request for us to let them know when we wanted to do it recently. And they wanted to know whether we wanted to use one of our existing meeting times or add a meeting time. So that's something we have to think about.
I think it's pretty clear we don't want to use our existing meeting time. But let's come back. I don't think we're in a rush on this. But let's come back in the next meeting and think about it. What are the issue or issues, one or two, that we do want to discuss with them? That said, the next item on the agenda, and we're getting towards the end, is the FAC conference for the fall. We had talked about this before, and we said we would not do it in the spring, we would do it in the fall. And there was a group which may have had some discussion amongst themselves. I don't know if we have anything further to report. Yeah, Mary Beth.
Yeah, so Carmen, Diane, and I met shortly after our last FAC meeting, and just had kind of a little brainstorming session about the conference. And you know, as we had left the FAC meeting, we had kind of agreed that something this spring was not really going to be possible to pull together like a full conference. We also thought, after sort of discussing the logistics and without a budget being offered by the system office, we thought even a fall conference is kind of pushing it, as we're already at this date and would have no idea on how we would have enough money to hold at least an in-person fall conference. So our brainstorming session basically said, we would aim to, do a spring 2023 conference, request funds from system office, or if we're not going to get money from system office, then we would have to ask the unions for more money if we wanted to do something in person. Because I think, we got money from each of the unions last time. And even though it was a fully virtual conference, we used up basically all the money we had gotten. So if we wanted to have an in-person conference, we would certainly need more money than we had. And Carmen, I know Diane's not here today, but if I'm missing anything, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, okay.
The only other thing that we sort of said that we thought as an idea was, Carmen was saying, she feels like there's still a lot of people on our campuses that don't even know what the FAC is or what the FAC does. And so we had thought of perhaps instead of holding a conference this spring, we could just hold kind of like an FAC update meeting, open it, advertise it sort of similar. We would advertise the conference, but just have it as like a 1 hour, come and the FAC will update you on what we've been working on, as a way to, kind of get some of our information out, but maybe also let people know what the FAC does. And then also kind of have it as like a teaser that so we'll be having, we'll be hosting our conference next year, and we'll be looking for a call for proposals and something like that. And so we had thought it could be split up between 4 different ideas, maybe 4 different updates, in that 1 hour format, 15-minute updates. I think our ideas was maybe a legislative update, which maybe Kalina could do. And then a budget update, which maybe David could do, and then maybe something ACME related, math or English, And then, either split up like math 15 minutes, English 15 minutes, or that seems a little bit long. So maybe do like ACME as one 15-minute topic and then like another topic, whether it's, whatever other, one other topic is kind of one of our main ideas. And just invite anybody who wants to come. It's not really going to be a conference, but it's just going to be like a presentation. So that's kind of what we came up with, and just sort of throwing that out to everybody. And like I said, Carmen, if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in.
No, I can't think of anything at this point, but yeah, I mean, because I have made a point of trying to send out some information that we get from FAC, or if it's minutes from the last meeting, and just always kind of having FAC and just a little bit about FAC, and a link to their site so they can get previous minutes. But I just feel like still a lot of people aren't getting it. And I like the idea that I think Diana and both Mary Beth came up with. And just having like this as a teaser for people to kind of see what this is all about. And even the stuff with ACME, we actually had at our last Senate meeting at Capitol, we had someone speak about the English changes. No, actually, at this point, we just had someone speak about the math, because I'm in science and math. And there was a lot of changes in math there that I think just even within the science and math department had no idea what the proposals are. And realizing that even a lot of people, even in math at the four-year schools, don't, because they're not all participating in these ACME meetings. And they're basically saying, with whatever we're deciding on math, it's not the ACME, but whatever we're deciding in math for the community colleges, whether they have a prerequisite or not, this is going to the four-year colleges, whether they like it or not. So, but unfortunately, we don't have that many four-year representatives at these meetings. So there's just a lot of confusion overall. So anyway, I just, again, I think this is more of an informational type of meeting. Yeah.
And you were thinking of that for this spring?
Yeah, we were like, I don't know, soon.
Yeah, we would have to decide at the latest at either this meeting or our next meeting.
Right.
And then in that case, we could do it. I think our next meeting is the beginning of April. We could do it for later April or the beginning of May.
Yes.
So let's put that on the agenda for the next meeting, unless there's, strong feelings that we should agree to do that right now.
I'm happy to join your next meeting. And I should say I kind of dropped the ball. I promised to reach out to Ken Kluchnik to figure out, because I think the request was made to find out whether there's a possibility of an FAC budget. So I only just did that, so I haven't heard back from him yet. So let you know.
Okay. Well, we'll follow that between now and the next meeting. But that's an interesting idea, to have that kind of a 1 hour information session. Perhaps 3 topics would be enough. Because I suspect if we did ACME, that would already be quite a bit. And certainly having the university people interact. I know I attended a meeting of some of the ACME people with 2 of the faculty from my university, and it's a big issue. Okay, bylaws revision 2022. That would be Linda, I guess. Is there anything new on that front? If not, we can leave that for the next meeting. Which brings us to item 12, Research Committee. I think we've already actually done.
It looks like Linda's trying to talk.
Here's Linda. Sorry. You're still muted, Linda. No, we're still not getting you.
All right, hold on.
That's it.
Can you hear me now? Sorry,
Yes,
I had
go ahead.
turned my microphone down.
Okay.
Anyways, basically, I just went through what we had and sent to everybody what the current, the one that had the Charter Oak stuff right. But I wasn't on the bylaws committee. I had helped edit that in terms of just making sure that the Charter Oak elections were correct, and I sent that out. So I don't have anything else to report or do. I don't know that there's anything else there.
And I think we can simply update our statutes with the the statement that you forwarded to us, since that's simply correcting. All right. Research committee, that's the last item on the agenda. And we've done something in that respect as concerns funding with Brendan, Kalina, and myself. Is there any other research areas that we want to look into? Last call as we approach 3:30 and the end of the meeting. Brendan, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so if we're embarking on this effort to calculate, net revenue or whatever it is by academic discipline, maybe we should conduct analysis of net revenue by administrative department, like what's the net revenue created by the central office? What's the net revenue created by different, I don't know, vice presidents, regional or otherwise? I don't know if that would be a research question or maybe an observation we can make to the board that maybe net revenue should be calculated for everybody. That was just a thought I had. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that one of the things, for example, that we're doing at CCSU is getting the budget numbers by, up to now, it's been simply personnel costs. Now we want it broken down to faculty, staff, and administration costs. And I think that's something that we can look at here as well. The overall costs of administration, the transition costs to the one community college, right? Those are issues. Lois and then Ron.
I think that's a great idea. I would love to know the return on investment we get from people like Chang and Rook and Kluznik and so on and so forth. We need to do that.
Ron?
I think it's also important for us to keep an eye on success rates, because the narrative that is being spun with Netchi and to the legislators is all about retention, and enrollment. And I think and Lois has said this too in the chat, and others have said this in the chat. And that is, it's really easy to retain students. All you need to do is water down the curriculum to the point where they don't have to do anything, and you just give them all A's. That's how but success is something completely different. And KPIs are also not a measure of success. KPIs are a measure of progress. And progress, like retention, is all a factor of how well, how many students are being passed. It has nothing to do with success rates. So I think it's important for us to hold the administration's feet to the fire in terms of making sure that they are accountable, or that they are measuring the right things. KPIs are not good measures of what our colleges are about. They're really, really flawed measures, and it's really important that we should be measuring student success.
Yeah, I think one part of the research that we could do is on the question of the framework, because it tends to be reduced to a few numbers on a spreadsheet, purely quantitative. And of course, that is relevant, but it's not the whole story. And the whole qualitative aspect of what is the experience, what's the satisfaction, what are the achievements of students, faculty, and staff, that gets left out. So I think, part of it is going to be looking at the evolution of the costs of administration. I think that's probably a pretty important component. Secondly, we have a lot of retirements coming up. And I think we should be looking at, what percentage of those retirements are going to be replaced, right? And then thirdly, we have this framework issue. Brendan, go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing too is, where is scholarship in all of this discussion of achievement by the universities? Our faculty are at least nominally innovating in their fields, and that should have a benefit to the state. For bigger or for certain universities, you look at how many patents have come out of, the university and that sort of thing as contributions. But I don't know. I mean, our contracts require us to do scholarship for promotion, and that's, just completely absent in the discussion of what our institutions bring to the state.
Yeah, I think that's something to look at in terms of the framework. How do we judge? Now I'm looking for the word, but I guess the word is success overall, and what are the quantitative and qualitative aspects of it, including the intangibles. So that's something that we can, I think, let's try and get together and work on this sometime in the near future. Carmen, did you have something?
Yeah, because I had come in late when William Terry Brown was speaking. And, I commend him for trying to work with the group and is a nice guy and trying to get faculty on board. And just kind of constantly saying, well, we're trying to go, we have a certain vision, we're going in a direction of it. It can be altered. We need your input there. And I guess, one of the things that I just kind of jotting down all the things is like, it's hard to get faculty on board, especially since in the past we've been trying to work on this. And I feel like a lot of our ideas were completely dismissed. But if I just kind of look at all the different things so far that I have seen within our college, that if I could see some things right now that are actually better, then I'd be more inclined to help join in on the cause here. But like, as far as like the hiring process to get people, that has been a disaster. It's taken way too long, and it's really affected our department. Advising, I'm getting more and more students who are getting advising advice or in classes that they don't belong in. And I just, now that has happened in the past, but I feel like it's worse now. And I just feel terrible for students who are paying their own money and then put into a class. Of course, it's not until the first couple of weeks you realize, oh, you don't even need this class radiology technician or whatever it is. Even stuff like IT, like if I have a problem in my classroom, I used to just go over to IT and have someone come and help me with my class. And right now there's just this whole rigmarole of all the stuff with IT you have to follow. And it's just very inflexible. Human resources, we don't have anyone at the college, or very rarely do we have one. And there's been problems with even me personally. I haven't gotten paid for like summer teaching until I was pretty much done because there was a problem between HR and payroll. Students trying to contact people at the college for advice about financial aid, advising. And there's many students I have I was advisors for. I'm an advisor for, that will call me about all sorts of questions in case they can't get a hold of anybody else. So those are just a list of things that so far, every single thing that's been changed is problematic. And if we could find some things that were actually beneficial at this point, we'd be more inclined. And I wasn't sure if I'd say that to William Terry Brown, but I mean, it's like, why do I want to join a committee when my ideas were dismissed before? And it's just going in a bad direction there. And it's so frustrating. So I don't know if, I tried to testify a little bit, kind of talk about that a bit here, but just something to just throw out there, nothing to even respond to.
I just want to echo that, Carmen, and note that what we actually got was ways that we could preserve uniqueness, et cetera, in spite of the consolidated structure, not because of it. And a couple of years ago, we had the opportunity to talk with David Levinson when he was interim president, and asked for specific processes that would support the equity goal, right? Like, what is it about this structure that allows for greater equity? And that, again, we could not get an answer. So I just want to, just echo what you're saying. It's very, very hard to find anything that you can latch onto there.
Okay, other comments? Well, that puts us to the end of our agenda. I don't know if there's any other business that you want to bring up. Now is the time to say so, and we can always put it on for the next agenda. If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And seconded?
Second.
Second.
Okay, Vu and Carmen. All right. Well, we traditionally don't have a vote on this matter. All I do is I turn off the recording. So we'll get together again in April. There's quite a few things to follow up, and Colleen and I will do that. Thank you all for attending. Bye now. I'm going to stop recording now.